So this is my good friend Todd Fisher, and Todd, can you tell us how you ended up knowing John Belushi and what his personality was like for someone that's would have never met him?
First time I met John was with Carrie, and it was around the time that he was doing Animal House, and he was at the Chateau Marmont, and Carrie took me up there, and he was just hanging out in his room. I guess he was rehearsing some of the lines and the things that they were working on. And of course I knew him from Saturday Night Live and things like that. But everybody was just really kind of super friendly. And I didn't really know at that moment that Carrie was dating Danny. And that was kind of how all...
Danny who?
Danny who? Danny, what, Jake?
The man behind you, yeah. Elwood Blues.
Elwood. Yeah, no, so Danny Aykroyd was... seeing Carrie, and I've given you a couple of pictures you can use to show them. They're very cute together. I didn't really know at that exact moment that was happening, but he was extremely nice and very mellow and not at all on like you might have expected given his personality and a lot of the roles that he plays. And then right around that time is when the Blues Brothers thing, I mean sometime after that, I mean Carrie and as far as, if you look at it sequentially, I'm wondering if that's really what was happening. What was after Animal House for him, do we remember?
1941, I believe they put him in that, and then... I'm
just asking that question because I'm not sure time-wise, I can't be absolutely sure that he was rehearsing for one thing or the other. I thought it might have been Animal House because I seem to remember we were joking around with some of those jokes from that movie. But then again, that could have just been Carrie and him. But Carrie and him always got along because they were kind of fellow travelers in terms of their struggles with drug abuse, but also, I suspect, in terms of depression and other issues. So there was an interesting symbiotic relationship between them. Whereas Danny was more like me. And... personality-wise, it didn't have those same problems. I remember Carrie, when she was just starting to date Danny, she came up to my house with him, and I was filming for a show that I was doing, and I got them to do the opening to my show, the two of them together, and we kind of just improv'd it out. We said, well, what should we do? Should we have, what can we do? And so we decided we were going to do a celebrity interview with Carrie, and Danny would play security. But Danny comes out and goes, no celebrity interviews. And he's, trying to get her into the car. And so that's the joke of that little segment. And it became the opening to one of my shows. I was always trying to think of weird openings because we got to be pretty famous for having a zero opening just out of nowhere and left field openings. And then from that led to Danny playing a part in my series where he played Rod Serling. But all of this was happening while he's dating Carrie. He's coming over the house. We're riding motorcycles together, smoking pot on my front porch, whatever the case.
Was John around for any of that kind of stuff or doing his own thing?
So John moved up the street from me. I lived on Cedarbrook, off Coldwater, just above where Carrie eventually moved. But just a few blocks above that is where Danny bought his house, just to the north of on Coldwater where I was. And I got invited over there right at the Blues Brothers inception. They hadn't gone on tour, the movie hadn't been made, and they were jamming in his garage. And I'm talking about like Steve Cropper, a lot of these guys. And Danny invited me over because I made this stupid comment of saying, yeah, I play guitar. But when you're hanging with these other guys that he's bringing in, you don't play guitar. I mean, whatever you want to call that. There's the guys that he was bringing into the movie were the best of the best. I mean, so here we were literally in a garage band with John Belushi and Danny and everybody hanging out. I didn't know half the people there, but they were doing a lot of this blues style music. They were talking about the movie. They were talking about going on tour, and that's when Belushi said to me, he goes, so Danny says you play guitar. Once again, I made the mistake of saying, yeah, I play a little guitar or something like that. So next thing I know, I'm like jamming with guys like this. Now, all I can do is play rhythm because, you got
Matt Guitar Murphy. And
oh, fuck. It was, there's two mistakes you never want to make. That's one of them. Don't ever say in front of the best musicians that you play anything. At that point, you just say, I don't know anything about music. It was almost like that. I mean, I grew up in the business, but when you're comparing yourself to those people, forget it. It's like people my whole life have said, "Do you sing?" You know, and I say, "Yes, I can sing," but like compared to what? Like my dad, my brother. The other one is when I was in the service working on films in the military. We were doing some flying, and this one guy said, "Oh, you're a pilot, I understand. Now, you know, you're about to get into a fighter plane, you know, with a very experienced combat pilot, and he's going to show you that you're not a pilot."
Yeah.
And when we were done, he said, "Oh, I did everything I could to get you to throw up." So, you know, there's just something to be said for, you know, yeah, you may know how to do some of these things, but not compared to the best of the best. And the best of the best was in his garage. Yeah. And I have some pictures we took, as I think I've shared some of them, you know, of us hanging out in his garage.
Because he took it seriously. I saw that was a big thing. Like, it really pissed him off that a lot of people thought that the band was a joke, that he was doing it as kind of like a spoof. And he's like, I had a band when I was in high school. I love this music, and I'm trying to do something for real to turn people on to the great music.
Well, when I came into the scene, you wouldn't have been able to say anything about the band. Like, the guys that were sitting there playing were all the best of the best. I mean, it was not like somebody couldn't say, that's serious.
Yeah.
I remember when we I'm skipping forward a little bit, but when we're doing the concerts over at Universal.
Yeah, can I just like introduce the crazy way I found out about this? So I've always loved the Briefcase Full of Blues live album, and then I'm reading Dan's new book on the Blues Brothers, and he mentions that John took his own money and hired a mobile recording truck to record it. And I go, I know a guy that had a business as a mobile and I come back and ask you, and you said, yeah, that was us.
So I'm pretty sure, I want to remember it was at Universal.
It was.
Yeah. So
opening for Steve Martin.
That was just my memory of it all. And Steve Martin was in a way, you know, he was bigger maybe than they were in many ways. I mean, as a comedian, certainly. But Carrie was friends with Steve Martin from the New York days as well. You know, Saturday Night Live days kind of brought everybody together. And what was the producer's name of Saturday Night Live?
Lorne Michaels.
Lorne. So Paul Simon lived in the same building as Lorne Michaels, and like literally like down the hall, or like maybe one floor difference, Lorne Michaels was there. So when I would be visiting Carrie, there was always this gathering of the Saturday Night Live crew, including, you know, Danny and all the players, you know, and that's how I first met Steve Martin and some of these Saturday Night players. That's a side. You know, but that is kind of how these things started to happen. Carrie started hanging out with this New York crowd, and even bought a New York apartment, which was...
Was this after Star Wars or during? Okay.
Yeah, so there was no money prior to Star Wars to be buying condos in New York City, but Carrie did well on the first Star Wars. Not like crazy money, you know, but well enough to own her. She was renting an apartment just off Central Park, and that building went condo right at the perfect time. And so she was able to go out and use some of her Star Wars money to buy this what is now a condo and a parking spot. Crazy, right? So we had to arrange to get her car brought from California to New York. So she had a little Mercedes 450, and it got delivered to her condo in New York, where Sunday drives, you don't hardly ever use these cars, right? Mm-hmm. Years later, that car was sitting in the basement, just covered in dust.
Wow.
Like a garage find, you know, like literally she was getting ready to sell the condo at that point. And that car had been just left down there and never been used. I mean,
wow.
Like, why did we bring that car all the way from California just to sit there and rot? Anyway, segue back to Universal. So, you know, seeing these garage band, so to speak, parties up at Belushi's house was one thing, and I used to love to go out there. And he'd call me all the time, come hang out. Because it got to the point where I wasn't going to pick up an instrument. That would be almost like, I mean, I could do it. I could just sit there and play the rhythm or something. But really, it's like a joke, like to try to play with these guys.
Yeah.
I don't know if you can really understand this as a sort of a medium level musician, and then your guys are off the charts. So we would go up to that house lot. But anyway, it obviously evolved into let me show you a thing or two, like to do a concert. And I remember... you know, seeing this concert, and of course we recorded the concert, and you know, just in general, it was off the charts. I mean, they had put on a show that nobody thought they could do. Everybody, as you say, thought it was comedy. In a way, their shtick within the framework of it, but it's very serious music.
Yeah.
I mean, you know, and even Danny going, oh, you know, playing his harmonica.
Yeah, Rubber Biscuit and stuff.
I mean, it's still good stuff, and it is within it's what the audience wanted too. I mean, I think, you know, not taking it all too seriously was smart also, you know, from a marketing perspective. And it was you know what, I'll just say it this way, you know, from my perspective, I was really thrilled that Carrie was with Danny, and I just love the energy around these people. Very, very positive energy. A lot of great creative things were going on. Obviously, Carrie gets to be in the movie, you know, which was funny.
Kissing Belushi, ironically, and not Danny, her fiance at the time.
Now, Danny, you know, as Danny put it in Carrie's memorial, he said, you know, she was my showboat. And I thought about that. I had no idea he was going to say that, but I started to think about it and what it meant on a larger scale. You know, and to him, you know, she was like his dream, is what he's really saying. You know, like his dream woman. Well, I mean, I don't think he got the full difficulties of Carrie in certain respects. You know, and there was a journey, obviously, up and down with Carrie.
Yeah.
But he was there for a great time with Carrie. You know, they were really well matched in so many ways. And I was really not aware even of the breakup until Belushi told me about it. And I do know, like, Danny would sit and talk to me all the time about Carrie, to the point where I'd be like, hey, dude, can we talk about something else? He's like, you know, like you're going to pump somebody about his sister, right? You know, well, tell me about this, tell me about that. And I just say, look, you know, you got to be ready. You know, you get a lot with this package.
Yeah.
You know, I can tell you she can exhaust me, is what I used to say. You know, she can be exhausting, and she could wear you out. But you know what? He loved her so much it didn't matter. I mean, he gave his mother's ring to Carrie. The engagement ring was his mother's ring. You know, he was hardcore serious. So, long story short, I didn't really know. Carrie had not said anything. I think she was traveling and hadn't said anything to me about breaking it off with Danny and going to Paul Simon. But I was at a party up on the Rocks off Sunset.
That night, or the fateful night?
The fateful night. And we were upstairs, and I was hanging out with some friends, and sitting at the bar was Belushi. And when we saw each other, he said, "Oh man, come over." You know, so I'm sitting at the bar on his left, you know, and he's like, "Man, I'm really, really upset about this whole thing with Carrie and you know, Danny." And I was like, "What thing?" He goes, "Well, you know, they broke it up." I was like, "I didn't really know that they had broken it off." I said, "Are you sure?" "Oh yeah, you know, Danny is really upset. You know, you have no idea how upset he is." And really, in a way, this is also why he was upset that night. You know, is that was connect. I never discussed this even outside the book, and maybe I'm wrong that's why.
Could you tell he was on anything? Because they said that's where he started doing like the speedballs that in the bathroom there.
When the book first came, when they were writing the book about him, first of all, when he died. I mean, I'm going to tell the story in more detail, but when he died, you know, they came after me because I was with him that night. And I didn't talk because of my closeness with Danny and Carrie, particularly Danny. You know, I really just didn't think that I could add to it. Plus, I didn't want to talk about the drug aspects of it and things like that. Now, eventually, all of that came out in the book in some detail, that he happened to have been on drugs that night. But he said to me at the bar, "Hey, I'm really speeding my ass off. Do you have anything that could help me level out?" Now, I'm familiar with this dialogue with my sister and my father and everybody else. So you know, but at the time in particular, I didn't do any drugs at this time. I was completely, so I didn't even drink beer. So I was like, "No, I don't, but I know a few people around here that might." And so we steered him in a couple of different directions there, and we continued to hang out that night, and he continued to lament, you know, about how much he wanted them to be together. He never reflected on the moment where he kissed Carrie or any of that in the movie. He just loved Carrie. I mean, like I said, there was this thing, and now, of course, we know more about what that is, but they were connected on a lot of levels, experience-wise, life-wise. Experience-wise, in terms, I call it a fellow traveler. That's a term that's used amongst people that share bipolar disorder or depression or drug issues. And you know, you're on this journey, and you know, we all know where it ends up. It's a question of how quickly you get there. But when I was with him that night, you know, I couldn't help him with that. I introduced him to a few people that might have. Who knows exactly? I don't know what happened after that as far as if somebody helped him out. I know that at the end of the evening, I just loved hanging out with him. First of all, we had a lot in common. We loved talking tech about music and me with my recording truck and all of that. And I really appreciated the music that they were doing. I mean, give me a break. The Blues Brothers movie, man, is a tribute to the American Songbook from a different generation. My mother made movies of the American Songbook with Irving Berlin and that crew, and that is truly the American Songbook, or Joe Jim Cohan or something. But this was the other generation and their music, and it was so well done. I mean, all the people that, Ray Charles, Aretha Franklin, I mean, all of that stuff is just so important to have gotten to be made, and the way they did it was, I think, brilliant. I think it's as good as any musical that I can recall, certainly in contemporary times. Having said that, we always had that in common. That journey, I was there from the garage, to see that fulfilled. And to me, it's an extremely important piece, probably underrated in many ways.
Judy Belushi said that they believed in it so much that John actually paid for the recording of Briefcase Full of Blues out of his own pocket because he didn't want to wait around for the record label to get it all set up. He just paid it and waited to be paid back, she said, and it took an awful long time to get paid back for that.
I remember him many times, and Danny too, just saying, screw it, let's just do this ourselves. Because, convincing people of new ground is always difficult, especially in Hollywood. They always want to do what is known. Oh, Spider-Man 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Superman 1, 2, 3. I mean, they just follow, they have no original thought. This is a hardcore original thought. Or is it? It's really just a modern musical, but a blues musical with all those great people. It's very campy. Certainly breaks the fourth wall. Probably a lot of rules. But, Landis is not, John Landis, the director, not exactly a guy to follow any rules, as we know. And great, I'm glad. And what an interesting mix it all turned out to be. But I could just tell you that they would have, let's just say, done whatever it took. I mean, I didn't know he put out his own money, particularly, but I knew that he was just doing whatever he had to do to keep the ball moving. And when you'd run into somebody who was a naysayer, which is not hard to do in Hollywood, you just sometimes say, well, screw it, we'll do it ourselves. And that is the way how this all evolved. Even the concert and everything is what pushed other things to happen. That's how you get to the movie and everything else. And, when they asked Carrie to be in the movie, she would have done it for nothing. It was just, it was for fun. Carrie, I'm the one that was sort of training Carrie how to not look like a dork handling all those different weapons. And I think she did great. I mean, many people still to this day like that role as much as anything Carrie ever played. But in a way, it is Princess Leia running around, in a 20th century world.
Yeah. Well, it's crazy. Danny says in the book that they both bought houses in Martha's Vineyard with their first royalties check from Briefcase Full of Blues. So that's kind of thanks to you in a way. And that's where they said that John it was the only place he ever really felt where he could relax was Martha's Vineyard, so that's why they buried him there.
I never talked to him about Martha's Vineyard. The only times I interacted with him was in California, a little bit on tour. But, he always seemed sort of unsettled to me wherever he was. I don't think he was comfortable living at Chateau Marmont. Not that it's a nice place, but nice place to visit, but you wouldn't want to live there, so to speak.
Yeah.
So that leads to him buying that house up on Coldwater, and that was a fun place, at least from my perspective. And I have to admit, a lot of creative things happened in that garage. I mean, think about what was born there. That whole thing was born through those times. I just feel like, with the two of them, there was a certain piece of magic of the two of them that is very much like the most famous writing partners of all time in many ways. There was a magic when you put the two of them together. I mean, it's not unlike Paul Simon and Art Garfunkel or something to that effect.
Yeah.
But Art Garfunkel, just to put things in perspective, is a great harmonist, but he isn't up at Paul Simon's writing levels. He doesn't write at all. Where the two of them, I don't know any writer better on earth than Dan Aykroyd. The most creative writer you have ever seen in your life, period. I would give him, when I first tried to write something for him in my show, and he quickly ripped it apart and did what he wanted to do, and I was like, damn, that was amazing. I couldn't believe what he did with my basic little stuff. So next time, I just wrote a couple of paragraphs. I said, here's where we're going. Just what do you want to do? And then he would write this stuff out. But he had his vocabulary. You look at him, you think, oh, he's this kind of doofy guy with a motorcycle or a funky police car or whatever you think about Dan Aykroyd. Sorry. Highly, highly articulate. Like I said, one of the best writers. That's why I thought Carrie and him would just gel so well. I mean, the creative juices were off the chart. But here with Belushi, who also had his improv skills are second to none. And same thing with Danny. But Danny was the writer too. You know, he could write this stuff up and put it down on paper in seconds. I mean, I know writers that sit around for months laboring over stuff. That's not how it works. Danny just like,
yeah, they said the first draft of Blues Brothers, it was like 400 pages, and he put it like the cover of a phone book on it as a joke when he delivered it. And he said that's actually the only money he was ever paid for that. He said he was paid for $250,000 for the writing, and they said that even though he had points, the movie never broke enough money, they claimed, for him to warrant being paid anything beyond that.
Okay, so I heard the story you just said is that there was never any additional money paid to Dan Aykroyd in the way of royalties for writing the movie. Would not surprise me, because nobody was really sitting around like you might normally sit around and say, I'm going to write this, try to get paid for it. This was like a freight train going downhill with no brakes. So you just had to let it go. And I think he was just free-falling it. Everybody just jumped on board, literally. That is how all those people got involved. That's how everything happened. And wanted to. I mean, there were, you know, Danny is a very charming guy. I don't know if you've ever seen his roast of me that he did at the memorial. Did you ever see that?
No, I didn't.
Want me to share that with you?
Yeah, yeah.
He does a description of me that is hilarious, that I've never seen. He says, what would have happened if Elwood Blues and Princess Leia had gotten together and had a child? And then he starts to describe this child in some great detail. And he goes on and on and on with all these words. And he goes, in other words, we would have had Todd Fisher.
That's great.
Now, I was not expecting that at all. So I just think it's interesting that we have a certain mutual admiration for each other, but in different ways. He sees me as more the, obviously, tech. That was one of the words. He said tech, motor, savvy, didactic. You know, he throws out all these words. And I'm like, who is he talking about? And then he throws out my name. So from his perspective, that's what his see. But my perspective, what I see in reverse, is what I just described to you. I said, I don't know anybody that can do what he can do.
Can I ask you how you found out about John's passing and what Danny or what Carrie's reaction was that you know of?
Well, we were on the rocks, as I told you, and we had hung out most of the night talking about how upset he was that Carrie and Danny weren't getting together, and we had other discussions, as I mentioned, about him leveling out. And it got to be pretty late, about 2 in the morning. In fact, we were closing the joint. And we were like the last two people out in there's right between the two buildings is where the valet parking is. So we went down to valet parking and we're just saying, oh, well, let's get, you know, like, let's get together and jam, whatever. And it is like, we're standing there chit-chatting, and my car pulls up first. In those days, I drove a little CJ5 Jeep, and this little, with the top off. And so the Jeep pulls up. I said, all right, I'm out of here. I'll see you tomorrow. This was Saturday, by the way. So I get in the car, and as I'm pulling out onto Sunset Boulevard, I'm making a right turn towards Beverly Hills. I look up in my rearview mirror, you know, and he's just, you know, he's doing one of these things. And as I'm pulling away, you know, he gets smaller and smaller.
Yeah.
Finally, I turn to the left, out of view of that building, and then that's it, right? So I go to sleep. I get up early because we're doing a concert over at the Beverly Theater the next morning, and we're setting up for this concert. So I come walking into the Beverly Theater probably at 8 o'clock in the morning after not a great night's sleep, given the, you know, by the time I got home what time it was. And somebody runs up to me and goes, man, did you hear what happened to John Belushi? I said, what are you talking about? And they said he died of an overdose. I was standing in the aisle of the Beverly Theater walking down towards the station. I was just dead in my tracks. You know, and I was like, how do you know this? You know, what are you talking about? Of course, in those days, it was radio, right? And so it was all over the radio. And that guy actually had a radio. And I was like, I can't even believe this is true. So I started making some phone calls because I wasn't 100% sure it was true. I couldn't reach anybody. It was too early in the morning. No one even knew at that moment. And anyway, it was just became really obvious that it was true after it was on like every channel and everyone was talking about it. It was the first person my age that I'd ever lost.
Wow.
And that I remember, similar age, obviously a couple years older than me, but we were all kind of tight and friends, and I knew this was going to be a mega blow, to Carrie. People that run close to the edge by taking drugs, they kind of feed off of others themselves when they survive. So when you're a fellow traveler that's doing drugs and you constantly are surviving all of the odds, that's like a camaraderie. It's a small club, and Carrie and Jim were in that. I mean, John Belushi were in that club, and they were survivors. And then all of a sudden, Carrie, was about to find out that one of her, partners in this journey had not survived. And then you start thinking about the others that don't survive and all of that, and it scares people, especially people that are on this path. And Carrie was freaked out because I reached her first, and she had heard about it prior to me calling, but she was just unhinged. And I went over to her house, and everybody was. It was like losing a brother. I mean, in many ways, we were all, especially. Even more so with Carrie, I'm just the brother, the brother-in-law, whatever I would have been. But they were super tight. And I knew Danny was going to take this hard. I mean, they were beyond tight. I mean, I don't even know what to say about how close they were. I mean, you can't get closer. From what I just, whenever they were together, there was a certain magic, but it was just so obvious how close they were. And, I never, when they were doing that book, Wired, I never told my complete story about that evening because I just didn't think it was relevant. First of all, I didn't really add to it. I know nothing about the girl at the Marmont and all that. I knew nothing about what happened after the story I just told you.
Yeah.
But it is it's an important lesson, in many ways because, these people really shine bright in their lives. I mean, I like to look at it like this. In the movie business, we had these big lights for years that would light up the sets. They had big bulbs in them. They were very powerful. And they would light up the Technicolor sets. And it was magic. Wizard of Oz, that beautiful color you see, was lit by these very big old tungsten light bulbs. But they don't last very long. They burn out very quickly. Sure, they may be very bright, but they burn out very quickly. So I always felt that reflected some of our best stars in some way. You talk about Monroe and people like this. They shined very bright, but they burned out quick. And that's, in a way, what ended up happening with Belushi. But, we're not better off. We would have, think of what it could have been. I always like to think about it.
Yeah, Dan said he was writing Ghostbusters and was going to put John in that, so.
I'll tell you a Ghostbusters story. I was doing my show, and Dan was doing the opening to my show, and he was doing a show called The Demon Zone, and in the show there was a button that had a symbol with the red line through it of the devil with a red line through it. Within a year, Ghostbusters
had that as the logo.
Yeah, that was the lead in. But I'm not saying that's the only thing that drove it, but it is what led to that logo. And by the way, given how much he did for me, it's all in the family. I mean, and I'm not even saying it's the only driving point to it, but it may have led to a lot more. You don't know. But I'll show you a picture. I mean, he's in that skit playing Rod Serling. I mean, he nails it. He does the great Rod Serling thing. And there's the little
that's awesome
devil with the line through it. Remember that became the Ghostbusters logo. There was something going on. I don't know that we'll ever see those kind of things again in a lot of ways. The kind of magic that was happening with the kinds of people, the amount of talent that was still available in those days that you could bring together into things. In many ways those days are gone. I looked at my phone book the other day because we're doing an event this weekend, and I mean, literally, a 30% of the people are gone. And I don't mean just my mother's generation. I mean even some of Carrie's generation. And I was like, it's shocking at times when you see how many people are fading from our ranks.
Thank you for your recollection today and all the amazing stories people have never heard, Todd. Thank you.
Okay.